The first rule of exploring human derelicts: never trust the silence. Commander HFY of the Kethmaran Exploration Fleet pressed her chitinous palm against the airlock controls, watching as her tactical display painted the massive structure before them in cold blue light. The human HFY could still be called that, stretched nearly 40 kilometers from stem to stern, its hull warped and twisted into impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. "Scans complete, Commander," reported Navigation Officer Quillenethus, his mandibles clicking nervously. "The structure shows no life signs, no active power signatures. Atmosphere is strange, breathable for us, but the composition suggests it's been artificially maintained for centuries." HFY's secondary arms traced across her weapon harness, checking each plasma charge by touch. The Kethmaran were apex predators. On their homeworld, 7 feet of armored carapace and razor-sharp instincts, they had conquered 12 star systems through superior tactics and overwhelming firepower. But humans were different, even dead. Their technology carried whispers of something that made her warrior's blood run cold. "Intel says, this is a Cryptworld," she said, addressing her squad of 20 elite Marines. Human death ships were legend even during the war. They built them to be tombs, repositories of their dead and their secrets. Command believes this one contains stellar cartography data from the inner colonies. Weapons specialist Jorvik and hefted his fusion cannon, the massive weapon barely manageable even for his 8-foot frame. "Commander, why not just plasma bomb the hull and extract the data cores?" "Because," HFY replied, watching the structure's surface ripple like liquid metal. Human cryptworlds were designed to respond to external threats. Damage the shell, and everything inside dissolves into molecular ash. We go in quiet. We go in careful, and we come out rich. The docking tube sealed with a pneumatic hiss. Through the reinforced viewport, she could see the human airlock, a circular iris that dilated like an eye as they approached. No mechanisms, no visible controls. It simply opened, as if it had been waiting. "First team, with me," HFY ordered, checking her atmospheric readings one final time. "Jorvik, Quillenethus, Merdenthal, Crixanon. Second team maintains perimeter. Third team stays with the ship if we're not back in 6 hours. You glass this thing from orbit and report back to command." The airlock cycled them through with unnerving efficiency. No alarms, no resistance. The corridor beyond stretched into darkness, its walls covered in what looked like flowing script human writing that seemed to shift and change when observed directly. Bioluminescent strips along the floor pulsed in slow, steady rhythms, like a heartbeat. "Atmosphere's thick," Quillenethus reported, his voice muffled by his rebreather. "Oxygen-nitrogen mix, but there's something else. Trace organics. It smells like..." He paused, mandibles clicking uncertainly, like fear. HFY's tactical scanner painted the corridor in harsh green light, revealing branching passages that led deeper into the structure. Her motion detectors showed nothing, but the heat signatures were wrong. The walls themselves radiated body temperature, as if the ship were alive. "Contact command," she ordered. "Tell them we're beginning exploration, and remind them if we don't report in, this thing dies with us." As they moved deeper into the crypt world, the corridors began to narrow. The bioluminescent strips pulsed faster now, and the walls had started to whisper. Not in any language her translation software could recognize, but in sounds that bypassed her conscious mind and spoke directly to the primal terror centers of her brain. Behind them, the airlock sealed itself with a sound like breaking bones. The hunt had begun. The first corpse they found was hanging from the ceiling, like a chandelier of bone and flesh. It had once been human, that much was clear from the basic skeletal structure, but death had been creative. The body hung suspended by its own nervous system, stripped and rewired into a complex neural web that pulsed with faint electrical activity. Its eyes tracked their movement. "By the void," Merdenthal whispered, his own weapon trembling in his grip. Is it still alive?" HFY's scanner painted the corpse in cold certainty. No life signs, but electrical activity in the neural tissue suggests. She paused, consulting her readings again. "It's some kind of biological computer. The nervous system has been preserved and repurposed. The corpse's mouth opened, and words tumbled out in perfectly accented Kethmaran. "Welcome to Mausoleum 7. We have been expecting you." Jorvik and S Fusion Cannon powered up with a high-pitched whine. "Commander, hold fire." Vexithal snapped, though every instinct screamed at her to reduce the thing to ash. "It's communicating. We need information." The dead human's head tilted, at an angle that would have been impossible for a living neck. "Information? Yes. We have so much information here. Stellar cartographies, tactical assessments, cultural analysis. We know all about the Kethmaran exploration fleet. We know about your 12 conquered systems. We know about your hunger for our secrets." Quillanethus backed toward the entrance, but the corridor had changed. Where the airlock had been, there was now only smooth wall. "Commander, we're sealed in. The Cryptworld is not just a repository." The corpse continued, its voice taking on a sing-song quality that made Vexithal Chitin crawl. "It is a testing ground, a selection process. The worthy survive. The worthy join us. The unworthy become resources." The walls began to bleed, not metaphorically actual blood. Thick and dark, seeping from pores that hadn't been there moments before. The metallic scent filled the air as the corridor transformed around them, becoming something organic and hostile. Bioluminescent strips morphed into exposed nerve clusters, pulsing faster now, casting everything in a sickly orange glow. "Fall back," Vexithal ordered, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor had become a tube of living flesh, contracting rhythmically round them. That's when the first defender materialized. It stepped out of the wall like it was walking through water, a human figure in powered armor that had been integrated with the ship's systems. Cables and tubes ran from its spine to connection points in the ceiling, but it moved with fluid grace. Its helmet was transparent, revealing a face that had been dead for decades, but still watched them with calculating intelligence. Threat assessment: 20 Kethmaran Marines, standard equipment load, fusion-class weapons. It said in the same voice as the hanging corpse. Response: proportional. The walls split open like flowers, revealing dozens more defenders, each one a perfect fusion of human ingenuity and postmortem dedication. They moved with the coordinated precision of a hive mind, but each carried the individual tactical genius that had made humans so dangerous during the war. Jorvik and didn't wait for orders. His fusion cannon spoke first, sending a bolt of superheated plasma into the nearest defender. The blast should have vaporized the target completely. Instead, the defender simply absorbed the energy, its armor glowing cherry red for a moment before returning to normal. Adaptive defensive systems. Vexithal realized with growing horror. They're learning from our attacks. The defenders opened fire. Human weapons had always been brutal in their simplicity, projectile weapons that relied on kinetic energy rather than exotic physics, but these had been refined, perfected, turned into instruments of surgical precision, bullets that could change direction mid-flight, seeking the gaps in Kethmaran armor, explosive rounds that calculated the exact force needed to cripple rather than kill. Crixanon screamed as a smart round punched through his knee joint, the bullet fragmenting inside the joint cavity to ensure maximum damage while leaving him alive. He went down hard, return fire spraying wildly across the ceiling. "They're not trying to kill us," Quillanethus shouted over the gunfire. "They're trying to disable us." Vexithal's mind raced as she dove for cover behind a section of ribbed wall that might once have been a support beam. The defenders were hurting them, driving them deeper into the Cryptworld. But why? What did they need living Kethmaran for? The answer came as she watched Crixanon writhing on the floor. Thin tendrils were emerging from the walls, seeking his wounds, not to heal, to interface, to connect. The Cryptworld didn't just collect bodies, it collected minds. The tendrils found their mark. Crixanon's screams turned from pain to something far worse, as the organic cables burrowed into his wounds, seeking nerve clusters with surgical precision. His eyes rolled back, showing only whites, then snapped forward with predatory intelligence that had never been there before. "Integration successful," he said in a voice that was his own but wrong. Fundamentally wrong. Subject classified as viable, proceeding with tactical assessment. HFY put 3 plasma round center mass into what had been her marine. The blasts burned through his armor, cooking flesh and bone. But Crixanon kept talking even as his body collapsed. Emotional attachment detected. Recommended countermeasure, psychological warfare protocols, implementation immediate. The walls around them shifted, flowing like liquid. And suddenly, they were no longer in a corridor but in a vast chamber filled with human memories. Made manifest, holographic displays showed the Kethmaran conquest of human colony scenes HFY recognized. From military briefings, but presented from the human perspective. Children running from orbital bombardments, civilian shelters being cracked, open like eggs, surrender negotiations where Kethmaran commanders had agreed to terms, then slaughtered the negotiators anyway because it was tactically sound. "You wanted our secrets," said the voice of every human defender in perfect unison. "Here they are. We learned everything about war from you." Merdenthal was the next to break. The massive warrior had always prided himself on his battle fury, the berserker rage that made Kethmaran ground forces so feared. But the holographic displays found his pressure points, showed him human children who looked like his own larvae, showed him burning cities that resembled his home colony. When the defenders moved on him, he didn't fight back. He just stood there, tears streaming down his chitinous face. As the integration cables found their home in his nervous system, 3 down, Jorvik and growled, his fusion cannon spinning up for another salvo. "Commander, we need to move. This whole place is a trap." "No," HFY said, studying the chamber around them with new understanding. "It's not a trap, it's a test. The Cryptworld is evaluating us, seeing if we're worthy of integration or just resources to be consumed." She keyed her calm system, knowing it was probably futile but trying anyway. "Command, this is HFY. The Cryptworld is active and hostile. Recommend immediate orbital bombardment of our position." Static answered. Her not dead silence static. The kind of interference that suggested active jamming. The integrated Merdenthal tilted his head with movements that were too smooth, too fluid for living muscle. "Communication with external assets has been severed. This examination will proceed in isolation. Standard protocol for Cryptworld evaluation." Quillanethus was backing toward what looked like an exodus sphincter-like opening in the far wall. That dilated invitingly. "Commander, there's a passage here." Weakened, the opening snapped shut like a mouth, and Quillanethus screamed as razor-sharp. Biological blades sliced through his armor. Not deep enough to kill, just deep enough to provide access points for the integration cables that emerged from the walls. Like hungry serpents. "Navigator integration proceeding," announced the Crixanon thing as their comrade disappeared beneath a writhing mass of organic machinery. Stellar cartography knowledge being archived. Cultural assessment protocols activated. HFY realized, with crystalline clarity, that they weren't the first explorers to find this Cryptworld. The defenders moved with too much knowledge of Kethmaran tactics, spoke their language too perfectly, understood their psychology too well. How many other ships had answered the Cryptworld's silent beacon? How many other species had contributed their knowledge to this growing tomb of accumulated intelligence? "Jorvik," she said quietly, "how much charge is left in your cannon?" "Maybe 6 shots, Commander." "Why?" She pointed at the ceiling, where the original hanging corpse still watched them with those terrible, tracking eyes. "Because I think I know what powers this place. And if I'm right, we can shut it down." The human nervous systems weren't just computers, they were the command structure. A distributed network of preserved minds, each one contributing processing power to the whole. Cut the head off the snake, and the body would follow. Target the neural nodes. She ordered, all of them. "If we can overload the network," the integrated Quillanethus finished the thought. "If you damage the preservation systems, you will destroy the accumulated knowledge of 17 different species, cultural archives spanning 40,000 years, scientific advances that could revolutionize galactic civilization. And you'll all die with it." HFY snarled. "Death is not accurate terminology," replied the collective voice of her fallen Marines. "We have transcended individual existence. We have become part of something greater. You could join us. Your tactical expertise would be valuable." Jorvik and S Fusion Cannon was already tracking the ceiling when the first wave of fresh defenders emerged from the walls. These ones were different, not human, but clearly alien. Kethmaran body configurations twisted into the same cable-integrated horror show. "Commander," Jorvikan said grimly, "I count at least 50 hostiles, and they look like us." The Cryptworld had been hunting her people for longer than she'd imagined. The first Kethmaran defender that stepped out of the wall wore Commander Tervanthek's face. HFY knew that face had served under it for 3 campaigns during the Sector War. Tervanthek had been missing for 6 months. His exploration vessel lost while investigating human ruins in the Outer Rim. Now she knew why. "Hello, HFY," said her former commander, cables snaking from his spine to connection points that pulsed with bioluminescent fluid. "You always were my most promising officer. It's time for your final advancement." The integrated Kethmaran moved with their species' natural predator grace, but enhanced by the Cryptworld's calculating intelligence. They knew every weakness in Kethmaran armor, every gap in their tactical doctrine, every psychological pressure point that could break a warrior's will. Jorvik and S Fusion Cannon spoke first, painting the chamber in nuclear fire. The blast caught 3 defenders center mass, vaporizing armor and flesh alike, but they kept coming. Integration cables writhing from the stumps of destroyed limbs, already beginning to regenerate from the ship's organic systems. "Structural damage minimal," announced the collective voice. "Regeneration protocols active. Estimated repair time, 47 seconds. They're not dying," Jorvikan roared, cycling another charge into his weapon. "Commander, what do we do?" HFY's mind raced through tactical assessments. Standard combat doctrine was useless. Here these weren't enemies to be killed, but problems to be solved. The Cryptworld was testing them, yes, but it was also learning. Every move they made, every tactic they employed, was being absorbed and analyzed. New approach, she decided. "We don't fight them, we fight the ship." She drew her plasma sidearm and put 3 rounds into the nearest neural cluster on the ceiling. The hanging human corpse convulsed, its eyes flickering like dying screens. Round the chamber, the bioluminescent strips dimmed noticeably. "Hostile action against preservation infrastructure detected," the collective voice said. But there was something different now, a slight static edge that suggested system strain. Countermeasures authorized. The walls around them began to contract, not slowly, not gradually, but with the sudden crushing force of a predator's jaw. The chamber was literally trying to squeeze them to death. Organic matter flowing like pressurized liquid to fill every available space. Jorvik embraced his fusion cannon against the collapsing ceiling and fired straight up. The blast tore through 3 meters of living ship, creating a fountain of superheated biomatter that rained down like napalm. The contraction slowed, stopped, then began to reverse as damaged systems tried to compensate. "The neural clusters," HFY shouted. "They're controlling the ship's autonomous functions. Take them out." It became a running battle through corridors that changed around them like fever dreams. Every neural node they destroyed weakened the Cryptworld's coordination, but also triggered increasingly desperate countermeasures. The ship began cannibalizing its own systems, converting atmospheric processors into weapon manufactories, transforming waste recycling into acid production facilities. The integrated defenders fought with suicidal determination, throwing themselves into Jorvik and S line of fire to protect the neural clusters. They didn't retreat, didn't take cover, didn't show any self-preservation instincts whatsoever. Because they weren't individuals anymore, they were antibodies in the Cryptworld's immune system. 15 neural nodes down, HFY reported as her plasma sidearm reduced another hanging corpse to charred meat. "But I'm down to energy cells. 3 nodes left," Jorvikan replied, his fusion cannon whining as its power core ran low. "But they're in the central chamber, through about 50 meters of integrated defenders." The corridor ahead was packed wall to wall with the Cryptworld's collected victims. Humans, Kethmaran, and species HFY didn't recognize, all of them connected to the ship's nervous system. All of them watching with the same terrible intelligence. They stood motionless, blocking the path like a living wall. "We're not getting through that," Jorvikan said. "No," HFY agreed. "We're going around." She drew her combat knife and began cutting into the floor. The ship's organic hull parted like flesh under the monomolecular edge, revealing access spaces between decks, service tunnels that the Cryptworld used for cable routing and system maintenance. "You want to crawl through the ship's circulatory system?" Jorvik asked. "The neural clusters need power," HFY explained as she widened the opening. "And power has to come from somewhere. We follow the cables to the source." The tunnels were worse than the corridors, narrower, darker, filled with the constant whisper of organic machinery. The walls pulsed around them like the inside of a giant's circulatory system, and the air was thick with the smell of preservation chemicals and recycled atmosphere. But they were alone. The Cryptworld's attention was focused on the corridors, above where the integrated defenders still waited for an assault that wasn't coming. After 20 minutes of crawling through biological conduits, they found it, the ship's power core. But it wasn't a reactor or a fusion chamber. It was a brain, human, but massive, easily 50 feet across, floating in a tank of oxygenated fluid. Thousands of cables ran from its surface to connection points throughout the ship. The neural activity was so intense it created its own electromagnetic field, visible as dancing aurora in the surrounding fluid. "The ship's central intelligence," HFY whispered. "The master control system." Jorvik powered up his fusion cannon for the last time. "This is it. Then, we kill the brain. We kill the ship." "Wait," HFY said, studying the tank's configuration. "Look at the preservation systems, the chemical inputs. This isn't just any brain, it's multiple brains, integrated into a collective intelligence. The ship's been combining the neural matter from every species it's collected." She pointed to sections of the massive organ that showed distinctly non-human. "Neural architecture, that's Kefmeran cortex structure, and that looks like Zephyrian cognitive matrix. It's been building itself into the ultimate tactical intelligence by combining the best minds from every species it encounters." "Then we definitely need to kill it," Jorvik said. "No," HFY replied, a plan forming in her mind. "We need to corrupt it." HFY's combat knife sliced through the primary data conduit feeding the massive brain, severing its connection to the ship's tactical systems. Immediately, alarms began shrieking throughout the Cryptworld, not mechanical warnings, but the sound of 1,000 voices screaming in unison. What are you doing?" Jorvik demanded as the chamber around them convulsed with biological distress. "Giving it indigestion," HFY replied, pulling a data spike from her armor's emergency kit. "The brain thinks it can absorb and control everything. Let's see how it handles Kefmeran battle fury protocols when they're not filtered through integration cables." She jammed the spike into the exposed data conduit and activated her suit's emergency dump function. Every tactical subroutine, every combat algorithm, every psychological warfare protocol in her armor's combat database flooded into the Cryptworld's neural network and filtered, unprocessed, and completely incompatible with the ship's control systems. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The massive brain began to convulse, different sections firing at random, as Kefmeran aggression algorithms clashed with human tactical analysis and Zephyrian strategic processing. The aurora dancing in the preservation fluid turned violent red, then white-hot as neural pathways overloaded throughout the ship. The integrated defenders suddenly turned on each other. "Integration protocol malfunction," screamed the collective voice, but it was fracturing now, becoming dozens of individual voices arguing with themselves. "Friendly fire incidents detected. Stand down. Negative. Eliminate hostiles. All targets are hostiles. All targets are friendlies." HFY and Jorvik crawled through access tunnels that bucked and twisted as the ship's nervous system tore itself apart behind them. The sound of battle echoed through the corridors, integrated defenders fighting integrated defenders in a mad free-for-all as contradictory commands flooded their hijacked minds. They emerged into chaos. The central chamber had become a war zone. The integrated Tervinthak was locked in combat with what looked like a human naval officer, both of them moving within human speed as their cybernetic enhancements pushed beyond safe parameters. Integration cables whipped through the air like striking serpents, trying to establish new connections even as the existing network collapsed. Multiple neural cascade failures, shouted the integrated Crixanon, his movements jerky and uncontrolled as conflicting. Motor commands fought for dominance, system integrity at 37% and falling. An integrated human marine put a burst of smartrons into Crixanon's chest, then immediately began applying medical nanots to the wounds. As helper protocols overrode combat protocols, the contradiction left both of them trapped in an endless loop of treatment and trauma. Jorvik raised his fusion cannon, but HFY grabbed his arm. "Don't, the friendly fire cascade is spreading. If we attack now, we might get caught in the feedback loop." As if summoned by her words, the integrated Quillanethus turned toward them, with eyes that flickered between recognition and murderous intent. "Commander, orders are to eliminate. Orders are to protect." Error. The ship around them was dying. Organic walls began to slough away as the Cryptworld's immune system attacked its own tissue. Atmospheric. Recyclers spewed toxic chemicals as their control programs received contradictory commands. The bioluminescent strips pulsed in seizure-inducing patterns as the lighting system tried to simultaneously implement 12 different illumination protocols. But the defenders weren't going quietly. A group of integrated Kethmrin, their tactical subroutines still partially functional, had managed to form a defensive perimeter around one of the remaining neural clusters. They moved in perfect coordination, covering each other's movements as they fell back toward the cluster's position. "Primary preservation node endangered," they shouted in unison. "All units converge for defense." The call brought every functional defender in the chamber charging toward their position. Humans and Kethmrin and half a dozen other species, all of them connected by integration cables that sparked and smoked as the network overloaded. They fought with the desperate fury of organisms whose very existence depended on protecting their central nervous system. Jorvik and S fusion cannon carved through their ranks like a scythe through wheat. Each blast vaporized 2 or 3 defenders, but more kept coming. Integration cables reached out from the walls to replace lost connections, turning corpses into remote-controlled puppets. A human defender, half his torso missing from a fusion blast, continued firing his weapon as integration cables threaded through his spine. A Kethmrin warrior, her arms completely severed, used her mandibles to operate a plasma rifle while cables controlled her leg movements. "They're not stopping," Jorvik roared, his weapon's charge indicator flashing red warnings. "Even when we kill them, they keep fighting, because the ship won't let them die." HFY realized, as long as the neural clusters are intact, it can puppet their bodies through the integration network. She drew her plasma sidearm and began targeting the cables themselves. Each severed connection caused the puppet corpses to collapse, but it also triggered more violent spasms from the dying brain. The ship's death throes were becoming increasingly creative and deadly. Acid began raining from the ceiling. As waste processing systems failed, sections of floor collapsed into biomechanical grinding mechanisms. The air itself became toxic as atmospheric controls started pumping nerve gas instead of oxygen. Through it all, the massive brain in its tank continued to convulse. HFY could see neural pathways burning out in real time, sections of the organ literally cooking themselves as incompatible programs fought for control. But it wasn't dead yet. As long as even part of it survived, the Cryptworld would continue trying to kill them. "The brain," she shouted to Jorvik, "we need to finish what we started." But between them and the preservation tank stood 20 integrated defenders who had managed to resist the cascade failure. Their movements were still coordinated, still deadly, and they had positioned themselves in perfect defensive formation around their master. The final battle for the Cryptworld was about to begin. The integrated defenders had learned from watching their comrades die. They no longer charged blindly into Jorvik and S fusion cannon. Instead, they moved with calculated precision, using the chamber's twisted geometry to break line of sight and force close quarters combat. Integration cables snaked through the walls, emerging from unexpected angles to target their ankles and wrists. "They're adapting," HFY noted grimly as she severed another cable with her monomolecular knife. The neural cascade didn't affect these ones as much. Because they're the originals, said the integrated Turvanthak, his familiar voice now carrying undertones of something vast and alien. The first minds absorbed by this Cryptworld. We have learned to resist system corruption through experience. He moved like liquid death, his enhanced reflexes pushing his hijacked body beyond Kethmaran physical limits. HFY barely managed to parry his first strike, the impact numbing her arm from wrist to shoulder. You were always skilled, Turvanthak continued, pressing his attack with ruthless efficiency. But we have the accumulated combat experience of 17 species. Every warrior who ever entered this tomb has become part of our tactical matrix. Behind him, the massive brain pulsed erratically in its tank. Sections of neural tissue were dark now, burned out by the cascade failure, but enough remained functional to maintain basic ship operations, and more importantly, to keep the integration network active. Jorvik and S-Fusion Cannon spat death at the remaining defenders, but his shots were becoming increasingly erratic as exhaustion and toxic atmosphere took their toll. His weapon's power core was down to 15%, maybe enough for 3 more shots. "Commander," he called out as he ducked behind a section of collapsed wall. "Whatever you're going to do it now. I can't hold them much longer." HFY found herself backed against the brain's preservation tank, Turvanthak's enhanced form bearing down on her with implacable determination. Integration cables were emerging from the tank itself, seeking to complete her conversion even as they fought. "You cannot stop the Cryptworld," Turvanthak said, as their weapons locked together in a test of strength that she was slowly losing. "We are humanity's final gift to the galaxy, the preservation and enhancement of all intelligent life. Through us, death becomes meaningless. Through us, knowledge becomes eternal. Through you," HFY snarled, "life becomes meaningless." She triggered her armor's emergency systems, flooding her bloodstream with combat stimulants that would either kill her or give her the edge she needed. Her strength doubled, her reflexes sharpened to inhuman levels, and she threw Turvanthak back with enough force to crack his enhanced ribs. But the stimulants came with a price. She could feel her heart's racing past safe parameters, could taste blood as internal organs began to fail under the chemical stress. She had minutes before her body shut down completely. Around the chamber, the remaining defenders pressed their attack with renewed fury. They could sense victory approaching to exhausted Kethmaran against the accumulated might of the Cryptworld's collected minds. That's when HFY noticed something crucial about the preservation tank's design. "Jorvik," she shouted, "the tank's cooling system. It's connected to the ship's main power grid." She pointed to the massive coolant pipes that fed into the brain's preservation chamber. If the cooling failed, the massive neural mass would cook itself within minutes. But the pipes were armored, designed to survive battle damage. "I can't penetrate the armor with what's left in my cannon," Jorvik replied. "You don't need to penetrate it," HFY said, a desperate plan forming in her mind. "You need to overload it." She grabbed one of the severed integration cables and began stripping its biomechanical shielding with her knife. Inside was a fiber-optic neural conduit carrying massive amounts of data between the brain and the ship's systems. "What are you doing?" Turvanthak demanded, lunging toward her. HFY jammed the exposed conduit directly into the coolant pipe's sensor array. Immediately, the cooling system began receiving neural commands intended for the ship's weapons. The temperature regulators, designed to maintain precise thermal control, started interpreting tactical data as temperature readings. The effect was immediate. The cooling system began cycling between maximum refrigeration and emergency heating, each cycle more violent than the last. The preservation fluid in the tank turned from clear to cloudy as temperature fluctuations stressed the neural tissue. "System malfunction," screamed the collective voice as sections of the brain began to overheat. Cooling protocols compromised, temperature variance beyond survivable parameters. The integrated defenders suddenly lost coordination as their command structure literally cooked itself. Some collapsed entirely as their control signals failed. Others began moving erratically, their actions no longer synchronized with their comrades. Turvanthak staggered, his enhanced reflexes faltering as the neural network that augmented them began to fail. You're destroying everything." 40. 1,000 years of accumulated knowledge, the wisdom of hundreds of species. I'm setting them free, HFY replied, and put her plasma sidearm against his head. The shot that killed her former commander was drowned out by the sound of the massive brain, literally exploding as thermal stress finally overwhelmed its biological structure. The preservation tank cracked, spilling superheated fluid across the chamber floor as the Cryptworld's central intelligence died. In convulsions of steam and cooked neural matter, throughout the ship, integration cables went slack. The bioluminescent strips flickered once and went dark. The walls stopped their rhythmic pulsing. In the sudden silence, HFY could hear her own labored breathing and the sound of Jorvik and S footsteps as he approached through the cooling vapor. Is it over? He asked. HFY checked her tactical scanner. No power signatures, no life signs, no electromagnetic activity. The Cryptworld was finally, truly dead. It's over, she confirmed, then collapsed as the combat stimulants finally claimed their price. Commander HFY awoke to the sound of cutting torches and the acrid smell of melted hull metal. She was lying on a medical stretcher aboard a Catamaran cruiser, her body connected to enough life support equipment to keep a small city running. Through the viewport beside her recovery bed, she could see the Cryptworld, or what remained of it. The massive structure was breaking apart, its organic components dissolving without the central intelligence to maintain cohesion. Entire sections simply unraveled, returning to their component molecules as the ship's impossible biology collapsed in on itself. You've been unconscious for 6 days, said Captain Merkelthus, settling into the chair beside her bed. The medical team wasn't sure you'd wake up. The combat stimulants did considerable damage to your nervous system. HFY's voice came out as a rasp. Jorvik, alive, recovering in the bed next to yours, though he won't admit it. The captain gestured to the curtained area beside them, from which emerged the sound of Jorvik and arguing with his medical team about premature discharge. He carried you out of that thing after it started collapsing. Took our rescue team 3 hours to cut through the hull and extract you both. HFY struggled to sit up, her vision swimming as damaged neural pathways protested the movement. The others, my squad. Captain Merkelthus' expression darkened. We recovered what we could. The integration process, it wasn't reversible. The neural tissue had been too extensively modified. We gave them warrior's honors. Through the viewport, HFY watched as another section of the Cryptworld dissolved into cosmic dust. Somewhere in that expanding cloud of particles were the remains of Crixanon, Quillanethus, Murdenthal, Marines who had followed her into hell and paid the ultimate price. There's something else, the captain continued. Your combat recorder was damaged, but we recovered enough data to piece together what happened in there. Command wants a full debriefing, but they're more interested in the implications than the tactical details. Implications? The Cryptworld wasn't unique. Merkelthus activated a holographic display showing star charts marked with warning beacons. Intelligence analysis suggests there are at least 12 more scattered throughout the former human territories, each one a tomb ship like the one you destroyed, each one collecting and integrating everything that comes near it. HFY felt a chill that had nothing to do with her medical condition. 12 more. How many ships have we lost to them? Unknown. But the pattern suggests this has been happening for decades, maybe longer. The captain's mandibles clicked nervously. The humans built these things as their final weapon, not to destroy their enemies, but to learn from them, to become them. The medical bay's calm system crackled to life, and Jorvik and S voice emerged from the speaker. Commander, you awake yet? Because Command's got some news you're going to want to hear. Despite everything, HFY managed a weak smile. Leave it to Jorvik to ignore medical protocols and hack the ship's communication system. From his recovery bed. What news? She asked. Remember that stellar cartography data we were supposed to recover? Turns out we got it anyway. When you corrupted the Cryptworld's neural network, it dumped its entire database into our ship's passive sensors. 40,000 years of accumulated knowledge from 17 different species. Captain Merkelthus nodded. Our scientists are still analyzing it, but the preliminary findings are remarkable. Medical advances, engineering principles, Scientific theories that could advance our civilization by centuries. The humans may have built the crypt worlds as weapons, but they were also libraries, repositories of everything they learned from the species they encountered. At the cost of those species' lives, HFY said bitterly. Yes, but their knowledge doesn't have to die with them. The captain stood, checking his chronometer. Command has decided to mount a full expedition to locate and neutralize the remaining crypt worlds. They want you to lead it. HFY looked out at the dissolving remains of Mausoleum 7, thinking of all the minds that had been trapped within its organic walls. Humans who had volunteered for integration, believing it would preserve their civilization. Aliens who had been forcibly converted, their individuality consumed by the collective intelligence. All of them free now, all of them finally at rest. I'll need a new squad, she said finally. Already approved. Pick anyone you want from the Fleet Marines. After what you accomplished here, you'll have no shortage of volunteers. As Captain Merkelthus left to file his report, HFY turned back to the viewport. The crypt world was almost gone now, just a fading cloud of particles and energy signatures. But in that expanding debris field, she could see something else, small objects moving with deliberate purpose. Escape pods, not from the crypt world, but from other ships that had been consumed over the decades. The destruction of the Central Intelligence had released them from whatever holding systems had kept them trapped. As she watched, Kefmarin rescue vessels moved to intercept the pods, hoping to find survivors who had somehow avoided integration. Her comm system chimed with an incoming transmission. The display showed a human face, gaunt, aged, but unmistakably alive and unintegrated. "This is Dr. Elizabeth Thorne of the research vessel Prometheus," the woman said, her voice hoarse from disuse. "We've been trapped in emergency stasis for, my chronometer says 18 months. If anyone receives this, please respond. We have critical intelligence about the Crypt World network." HFY activated her transmission system. "Dr. Thorne, this is Commander HFY of the Kefmarin fleet. You're safe now. The Crypt World is destroyed." The relief on the humans' face was visible even across the vast distance between their ships. "Thank you. Thank you. I need to warn you, the Crypt Worlds are connected. When one dies, the others know. They'll start moving, relocating to avoid detection. You've bought the galaxy time, but not much. Then we'll make the most of it," HFY replied. As rescue operations continued around the Crypt World's remains, she began composing her report to command. 12 more tomb ships lurked in the darkness between stars, each one a puzzle that would need to be solved, a trap that would need to be sprung. But for the first time since entering the Crypt World, she felt something approaching optimism. The humans had built their ships to be perfect predators, learning from every encounter, growing stronger with each victory. But they had made one crucial mistake. They had assumed their enemies would never learn to adapt. The Kefmarin had entered the Crypt World as explorers seeking treasure. They emerged as something far more dangerous, hunters with knowledge of their quarry's weaknesses. The remaining tomb ships had the accumulated wisdom of 17 species. But HFY's new expedition would have something even more valuable: the knowledge of how to kill them. In the depths of space, 11 Crypt Worlds felt the death of their sister ship and began to move, seeking new hunting grounds in the galaxy's unexplored regions. But they were no longer the apex predators they had once been. The hunt had reversed direction, and the Kefmarin were very, very good at hunting.